Let's download the Java development kit and get started developing. So I'm going to open up my browser and I'm going to navigate to oracle.com/JavaSE. So oracle.com, yes, the database company that owns the trademark to Java. And for years they've maintained a link of Java SE to the current version of the Java Standard Edition. So when I come here, I see that the current edition is 18, and I'm going to go to Downloads. We'll see that they're talking about Java 18 and 17. 17 is the current long-term support version. We find frequently in development that odd-numbered versions are the standard officially released ones. Even-numbered versions are sort of in-betweens in development phases here. I'll talk more about versioning in a future video. But we see that 18 is available until September of this year, when it will be superseded by Java 19, and that'll become the long-term support version. Right now, 17 is with support through 2024. Bottom line is none of that really matters to us at the moment. Don't worry about editions. Certainly don't worry about standard edition versus enterprise edition or any of that nonsense. This will do us fine for all the development we're going to do for quite a while. Okay, so looking at Java 18, I see it's available for Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. One of the features of Java is that it is cross-platform. So I'm going to jump over to Windows. I'm on a Windows machine here. I'm assuming most of you are. And then there is a compressed archive and there are installers. So it's up to you if you want to get the installer and let it do some things for you, but I strongly recommend you don't initially, or maybe come back later and do this, but I'm just going to get the compressed archive and set up a few things myself. Okay, so that downloads, and then I'm going to come over here to my downloads and see, oh, there it is. So I'm going to grab this thing and select it, Control X to cut it from the downloads directory, and where's my hard disk? There it is. Have a tools folder where I keep a lot of the commonly used tools, programs that I use. So, and you'll notice I have JDK 16 in here right now already. But what I'm going to do is select that, Control V, paste that here, and then I will unarchive it here. So you can use the Windows compressed tools, or I like to use 7-zip for a lot of things like this. So I'm going to say extract that here. And now I have a folder with that stuff in there, so I can get rid of that compressed archive if I don't want it anymore. And I'm going to open up that folder while I'm here and see that inside of here are several folders. Most importantly for us at the moment is the bin folder. That's bin, short for binaries, coming from the Unix world, where that's what we refer to programs that can be run as binaries. In Microsoft land, we tend to call them executables. If I open that folder up, I'll see that there's a bunch of DLLs, which are executable files, as well as some EXEs in here. And we'll come back and look at more of these in the future, but for the moment, the two that are most important to us is Java C, which is the actual Java compiler, and Java, which is the Java runtime environment or Java virtual machine. The way that Java achieves that cross-platformness of it is through compiling into an intermediate language that we call bytecode. And then there's a JVM or Java virtual machine, Java runtime environment on each different platform that will interpret it for the processor that's on that platform. More on that to come. But suffice to say that it's important for the moment to know where that is, so that when I come back here and I say, okay, it's in my tools folder. In fact, I'm going to select this and copy that because I'm going to need it in a few minutes. Here's my tools. One thing I strongly recommend is don't start putting your Java development files, your source code files, in this directory structure. Keep your tools separate from your code. So I tend to, on my hard disk, have a folder called com with my Joe's TA domain in there, and use that as my development hierarchy. It's actually a thing that Java people do as well, but I'm going to assume that you don't have a domain, and you don't need one for what we're doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, hey, create a new folder I'm going to put it right on my root. You can put it wherever you want as long as you know where it is. And if you need any help with that, see my CLI series. And I'm just going to call it project. Okay. In that folder, I'm going to create some shortcuts for both CMD and PowerShell. I don't know if I'll make them both in the same video or not. We'll see as we go along. And again, this is 2022. Microsoft is trying to do away with CMD. And I'm using Windows 10 and Windows 11 is out, but none of that stuff really should matter for us. Just be aware of that. So what I'm going to do is in this empty folder, I'm going to right click and say create a new shortcut. What do I want to create it to? I'm going to say CMD, which is the actual file name for the Windows command prompt. And if I start that up, what I notice is that it starts up with a working directory of Windows System 32. Not exactly what I want, but more importantly, if I say Java C, doesn't know what it is, can't find it. So I'm going to say, okay, exit out of that. The first thing I'm going to do is right click on the shortcut, go to properties, and we'll notice there's a target. The file is actually being run, and start in, which is the current directory when it starts up. And so what I'm going to do is remove that Windows System 32 and leave it blank. If you leave it blank, then the program will start up with a current directory of wherever the shortcut is. So now when I launch CMD, it's starting up in my project directory. Okay, step one. However, that didn't magically make it able to find Java C. Okay. So for that, we need to know something about environments. And I'll elaborate on this in a future video, but it's a common operating system thing that when an operating system starts a process, each process gets a little chunk of memory associated with it that's called its environment. And we talk about environment variables, where we can store values in that environment, and then they get inherited by child processes and some other things we can do with that. But basically, if I say path, CMD recognizes path as a name internally that it knows of an environment variable called path. And what we see is it is a semicolon separated list of places that CMD will search for files if it doesn't recognize it as an internal name. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to come over here and say create a new text file, and make sure, by the way, you're viewing file name extensions, view tab file name extensions, because I don't want a txt file. I'm going to call it env.bat. The first part of the name doesn't really matter. The extension of .bat is kind of important. I would keep it that. Do I wish to? Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Okay, and so now I'm going to edit this with a plain old text editor. Okay, we're going to need a text editor for our development. You can use any IDE like Eclipse or Visual Studio if you want, and I know Visual Studio Code is kind of popular as an editor. I myself am going to go with good old Notepad++, good old standby, fairly simple. That's all we need. So in here, I'm going to say path equals, no spaces, that's important. And then what I want the new path. Well, I want all of that stuff that was there to still be here. So I'm going to say %path%, okay, which is CMD's way of recognizing a variable. It's enclosed in % signs. Again, if you need more detail on that, see my CLI series for that. But that'll be replaced with the current value there. And then I'm going to add to that a semicolon to separate it from my new path. And that is going to be / to the root, tools, / I'm going to paste in, Control V, paste in that path that I kept earlier, the JDK folder name, and then / bin, where all those executables are. Okay. Then I'm going to save that, and I can actually get out of that for now, and say, okay, if I were to run CMD, as we said, it starts up in the current directory, but it doesn't know where Java C is. But if I said env, and I can just say env, what we'll notice is CMD said, I don't recognize env as a command, but it did go out and find it in the current directory. and it automatically attached the .bat extension. I could have done env.bat if I wanted. Either way, it works. But what we find is there's the path we've included. So now, if I say javac, it finds the Java compiler and runs. And we see this is coming from the javac program now, so I know it found it, it ran, and it's a compiler, so it says, hey, give me something to compile. If you don't, I'm going to tell you how to use me. So here's usage, the javac command, followed by some options, followed by source files. Okay. Again, more details if you need help with command prompt documentation formatting stuff. See my CLI series on that. Otherwise, I would say we'd be good to go, except that I still have to type in env.bat, and I want to eliminate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say help CMD. It's going to be help on the CMD program itself. Okay. Remember, CMD is just a program, and any CLI is. So it says, here's how you use me, CMD, and there are all of these different command line switches, options available, one of which is /k followed by a string. And so the /k says, carry out the command specified by the string and remain open. Okay. So a lot of times you want to run a batch file for some configuration things. IT people do this, and they just want to run and close and be quiet, kind of like that. But I want to, this time, have it run my batch file to set my environment and then have my prompt, the window, stay open. Okay. So I'm going to quit out of that for the moment, and then I'm going to come back here to my shortcut, go to its properties again, and this time in the target, I can now add a space, it's important, and then a /k, //. The / says it's a switch or an option to the command, not a path separator character, but I will follow that with the path to the batch file that I want to run, which is / to the root project / env. And I'll include the .bat here. It'll work with or without it. Okay, so now when I run my shortcut, we can see that not only does it start up in the current working directory, but it automatically runs that path, and I am simply ready to go and say javac, do your thing. All I need is a Java source file to compile. Okay, getting a little long for this video, so I'm going to stop and I'll start another one for doing the same thing in PowerShell.